We're here at Women at Woodstock 2013 in Berkeley, California. And I have Sherry Amatenstein with me, who just finished a workshop on healing past wounds. She was one of our 3 presenters. So Sherry, thank you so much for joining me for this little interview. And
I'm happy to be here.
Great, I'm happy that you are too. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, basically what did you talk about in the workshop and share with the women who were there?
Well, I'm a therapist, and I talked about some of my personal wounds on a personal level, because I think it's always helpful when people can connect and see you really understand and come at it from that way. And I talked about how we carry around with us so much guilt and so much shame, and we are constantly putting ourselves down for things. And I also talked a lot about how hard it is for us to forgive ourselves. We can get to the point where we can forgive other people, but it's still so difficult to forgive ourselves. So I did a powerful exercise with the group. I asked them first to imagine if it was a friend of theirs telling them these things that had happened to them and that they couldn't forgive themselves about, and that they really had guilt about and shame, and that how would they react. And usually it's always about, well, I would tell them to not be so hard on themselves, and it's fine, and that's just life. So I had them write a letter to themselves, like kind of from the lens of that compassionate, loving friend, to look at some of the grief and pain and trauma that they had sealed up so tight, and just look at it more from a way of forgiving themselves as they would forgive a friend.
And yeah, and that was a powerful exercise. And it was interesting what you talked about in the workshop about feeling guilt, not necessarily for something you did, but for perhaps not suffering as much as someone else suffered, or not bringing the happiness to your parents that you thought that you should have, or things like that.
Because my parents are Holocaust survivors, so whenever I did something that would bring them pain, I would feel terrible, because how could my suffering or anything that happened to me possibly compare, and how could I cause them pain? So it was always layers on layers of guilt.
Yes, right. And I never thought about that. I always thought only in terms of things that you had done or not done that you should have. And just almost feeling too fortunate, perhaps, is an interesting component of what we're all dealing with and maybe have never thought about.
I have a lot of patients say to me, well, I don't have a right to complain because I just heard this story, or my friend had this happen, or this or that or whatever. And I'm like, we're all different, and we all process things the same way, and we all come from a different place. And something that happens to somebody else has nothing to do with what happens to us.
Right, and if I broke my arm and it's a small break, but you broke your leg and it's more damaging, it doesn't mean my arm doesn't hurt. It's still valid.
It's
you
like,
can be grateful that maybe it wasn't your leg or whatever, but yeah. I know you had a lot of women come up to you at the end of the workshop. They wanted to talk with you, and without revealing anything confidential, I'm sure you've heard some interesting stories and feedback just from what we just did an hour ago. Can you share any of that?
It's been really lovely. There have been different waves of women coming up to me and saying how meaningful it was for them, that they do lock it away and not want to look at it. Or, like I had also said something during the workshop, it's helpful to also look at what you've gone through, not just to keep digging the same hole, looking at the same way, oh my God, this happened, or I did this, but okay, it happened. You can't change it. What can you learn from it? And that seemed to open something up for, a few people. So, and a lot of people hadn't, done this work before, and it was very powerful for them.
And interestingly, as I was leaving the room, one of the women sitting at my table said, when I came into this workshop, I thought, I wasn't sure I was going to come this morning because I don't have any, past wounds or guilt that I have to deal with. I just don't know what I would get out of this. And she said, as I was sitting there, I realized, oh my God, I do have an issue that's repeating in my life and I've always carried with me. And it really made her think. It was interesting. Usually you think people come in and they're ready for it. They want to get something out of it. And this was someone who was actually kind of resistant, but was made to think about it. And it was helpful for her. It was great to see.
I'm glad to hear that. And people seal it up. And I always kind of liken it to, they don't want to look at it, so they just throw it into the closet. And then they feel, okay, it's not bothering me anymore. And I've just thrown it into the closet, thrown it in the closet. But I tell them, eventually, if you don't go through some of those things in the closet, you're going to open the door and everything's going to come and fall down on your head.
Yeah, right.
That's
exactly.
not dealing with it. That's just denial.
Exactly. So, and we're all good at that. Denial works sometimes,
yes,
but
yeah.
it does build up after a while.
Yes.
Yeah. And is this what you deal with mostly in your practice? Or you do mostly marriage counseling? Or?
I do. I mean, therapy is therapy. My first career was journalism, and I still write articles, and I've published 3 books, and the 3 books that I've published are about relationships, and the last book that I published was a complete marriage counselor. So I do a good amount of couples counseling, but that's certainly not, all. It's what I'm sort of known for, let's say, but I love working with writers and artists. I actually work with a lot of midlife women. They feel very stuck, and they feel like, especially those who feel like they need to switch careers or just switch something. They feel like, well, I can't really reveal my age, and they're just, or I have a few patients who are empty nesters, let's say, and it's like, haven't worked in decades, and what can I do, and who am I? Who am I now? Once the kids are gone, what is your role now? And you know this, it's a big thing, so it can be a difficult time for a lot of people. So I do work actually with a good amount of midlife women.
And on that whole thing of transition and of this being a time in life, I refer to it as a time to declare your new major in life.
Right.
Because it can be a time of great sadness. Your children leave. If you've raised children, they go off to college, and maybe you're starting to look back and say, oh, I didn't build that fantastic career I thought I was going to build, and some of my friends have achieved things in the corporate world, or whatever it is. And you can kind of get mired. And I suppose that's some of what comes your way. And it's great to realize that you, like you said, realize it, don't put it in the closet.
It's there.
It's there.
It's there, okay,
now,
but that's not all of you.
Right, so let's
There's
go
a lot
forward.
of other stuff.
Yeah, and let's see what
discover.
can be. Let's
Yeah.
not make another 10 years of feeling regret. Let's do something that we want to do or achieve what we want to achieve. So that must be exciting. You must have a lot of great breakthroughs with your clients.
It feels wonderful to watch people open to new possibilities. And especially women in the boomer generation where, they were raised with that kind of mindset to be, all for the kids and all for this. And it's so difficult just to say, well, who am I? Just me. Not as a wife, not as a mother, but just me.
Yeah, exactly. And this is finally a time to actually ask that question and think about it. And not try to be all things to all people. And just, like you say, be who you want to be.
And it's not too late to make changes. It's not over. Yes, there are certain things you're probably not going to go and try out for the Olympics,
Be a ballerina, that's kind of behind
Exactly.
us.
Okay, maybe not that. But there's still so much, because there's so much wisdom that you have if you allow yourself to be there with it and feel it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that women have to offer at this stage of the game. And so it's not about what I can't anymore. It should be, what can I? I mean, I always say to people who are just stuck in this place, and I do have patients who are women at this age, and they just can't stand, men don't look at them anymore, and they're just constantly the wrinkles and the this, and I have to do this, and and they're just mired in that and how they look or don't think they look, and that tape is constantly going in their heads, and they're saying, well, I can't change, it's just how I've always been. And I'm like, but if not now, when?
Right.
What have you wanted to do that you haven't allowed yourself to do? You still can. It
Right.
really is, to me, if not now, when?
And instead of thinking I can't change my looks or my wrinkles, you can change how much importance you place on that.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It was a
Sure.
really powerful workshop this morning. I really appreciated it. And I'm glad you came and talked to me for a minute
Yeah.
and shared what you do. Really, really.
And thanks for doing
for
this.
us.
I think that what you're doing is a wonderful idea, and I think it will build and grow through the years.
Yes.